Welcome to What's Your Why? I am your host, Emmy DeGrappa, brought to you by Wyoming Humanities. In this podcast, we talk about culture, community, history, literature, and art, and a whole bunch of other stuff too. But we want to take you on a journey to discover people's passions and their inspirations and their why. And the why is at the core of the humanities. Why we do what we do, why it matters, and why does anyone care? And today, my special guest is young adult novelist Traci Jones. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. So I wanted to, talk about your journey into becoming a young adult novelist, because I did notice in your bio, let's see, your first degree was what, in creative writing?
My first degree was in psychology, and I actually started as an English major, and my very first class freshman year was an upper division Shakespeare class that I was not ready for, and I did poorly. And my professor said I was a horrible writer, and so I was getting a good grade in psychology. So thought, okay, let me just switch to psychology.
That is crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you started out with a degree in psychology, and then where did you go from there?
I went to college and I wanted to be a copywriter for an advertising agency. I wanted to go into marketing. So psychology was a good fit because there's all these theories of consumer behavior. So I was fine with that. And then after that, I went to the University of Denver and got a Master's of Science in Advertising. And then I worked in advertising.
And that makes sense to me now, because that's what I was reading in your bio, and I was like, wait a minute. How did she go from a master's in advertising to becoming a young adult author? How did that happen?
Well, as a kid, I was an avid reader when I was a kid. And then one Christmas, when I was in fourth grade, my mother gave me a manual typewriter, right? So a lot of readers are also writers. And I think she must have known that about that tie. So she and she had gotten a new electric typewriter that I would just love to mess with. So she gave me my own typewriter.
Yeah.
And I spent that Christmas break writing, my very first story.
Oh, I love that.
So, and I'd gotten writing awards in junior high, and I'd always done well with my papers in English. And it just never occurred to me, I think, growing up, that I could be an author, a novelist. And it could be because there were so few young adult books, period, but there were so few young adult books with an African-American female protagonist. So I didn't really see that on my shelves. I read a lot of L. Frank Baum and a lot of Judy Blume. And back in the 80s, then once you got through like Judy Blume and all those, there was like a gap, and suddenly you're reading V.C. Andrews, which none of us should have been reading, and things like that. So I grew up right before sort of that big advent of young adult literature. So it wasn't on my radar until I was flipping through the newspaper. This was how long ago it was. I was flipping through the Rocky Mountain News, and I saw an advertisement for a certificate in creative writing from the University College at the University of Denver.
Okay.
And that just sparked something in me. So I just started taking writing classes.
Wow, that is so interesting. And what is your inspiration? Or how do you go about finding your inspiration in your novels? What inspires you? And, do you get up in the middle of the night and get an idea?
Well, you get ideas from all sorts of places. My goal always is to write for the kid now who would have been me 40 years ago, right? So I'm always writing for the avid African-American female reader. Right. That's always my goal, my dream reader in my mind. The ideas I get from everywhere. My very first novel, Standing Against the Wind, was actually a homework assignment when I was taking those certificate classes. So the very first homework assignment that Andrea Dupree gave us was to write the first 10 pages of a work. And so that first 10 pages was the first chapter of Standing Against the Wind. I had actually a picture of a girl in my head when I started writing. And she was walking home from school and she was alone and feeling a bit lonely. And she was really, really cold. And I knew immediately that she was in Chicago because she was cold. And I had moved to Chicago in my 20s in January. And I thought, well, has got to be the coldest place on on Earth. And so when she was so cold, I knew she was walking alone home on school from the streets in Chicago. And it was really like a Polaroid picture. So I saw her, and the picture in my mind sort of developed, and became clearer, and why she was scared to go home, or anxious about getting home because of the bullies that were there waiting for her. And it was just really just sort of started small and expanded in my head. So that was the first one.
Wow.
And because it had done so well, I kept getting the question, did I base the story on my own childhood? And her childhood was nothing like my childhood. So my second story was, I thought, well, I grew up in the 70s in Colorado during the very beginning of integration and busing. So I thought I would tell that story as my second book. So that's how I got the inspiration for those two. My fourth book, Standing Against the Wind, is Silhouetted by the Blue. And Silhouetted by the Blue is a phrase in a lyric from Ragtime, the musical.
Okay.
There's this beautiful song, and I'm a huge musical fan. So I was driving my son to soccer practice and making him listen to musicals, which I'm sure he loved. And
he did.
It's a song called Our Children. And in the play, it's just two characters watching their kids play along the Jersey Shore. And one of the lines is that they're playing and they're silhouetted by the blue of the ocean. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was such a beautiful phrase. And I was like, that's going to be the title of my third book. And so then I had to back the story out of the title. And I was like, well, blue is a different way to say that you're sad. So what happens if a child her life is sort of defined by the depression of a parent? Mm-hmm. What happens? Mm-hmm. And then the fourth, Ransoming the Captive, I was watching, I think, 60 Minutes, and they were doing a profile on Laura Bush, the first lady for George H.W. Bush. And they were walking along the streets of her hometown, and they came to an intersection, and the reporter turns to her and says, so this is where you ran the stop sign and accidentally ran into and killed one of your classmates when you were 16.
Oh my God.
I know.
Oh my God.
I know. I had no idea. And she was like, yeah. And she said, I ran the stop sign. I wasn't paying attention. I ran into this young man I went to school with, and he died from the accident. And I still think about it every single day.
I bet.
Yeah, right. And she was, it happened when I think she was 16, and she was by then well into her 50s for the interview. And I just thought about the guilt that she just carried with her for decades, because how do you get rid of that guilt?
Right.
And so I came up with Ransoming the Captive, which is a young girl who, she and her friend are coming home from a party. She's driving. They run into kind of a herd of elk, and her friend had taken off her seatbelt to grab a cell phone, and she flies through the window, and she's killed. And I just thought about the aftermath, the immediate aftermath for that girl. So that's how I came up. So you get stories from everywhere, right? From music, from TV, from newspapers, mm-hmm. from your own life. They say to write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds so specific, I think, to new writers. But I always felt like sort of a misfit, like I had kind of different tastes than the rest of my classmates. I never felt bullied or anything, but I felt like different than. So I always try and write for kids stories about people who are different and how to sort of embrace the quirkiness and the experiences that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I get my inspiration. It's just living, really. living.
Living life. That's right.
Yeah.
And do you have any favorite novelists that you like to read? Not necessarily young adult, but you know.
Yeah, I read a ton of different genres. I really like Christopher Moore, but I feel like humor. It's hard to write funny, and he writes funny very well. When I'm feeling a little like action, I like Lee Child. I like the Jack Reacher books. I like Jodi Picoult, of course. I like Angie Thomas. I like Jasmine Guillory for romance, for contemporary romance. I like Stephanie Lawrence for historical romance. I like Ruta Simptis, she does a lot of really interesting historical stories. So, it's all over the place.
Has the number of African American novelists for young adults grown in our country? Has it gotten better for people to have?
It has gotten better.
Okay.
What I'm finding now is I was talking to another fellow writer, and she was writing, I can't remember what she was writing, but she was told, well, you need to add like a person of color, or like they were like ticking off this strange little list in their head,
right.
Which is a kind of disturbing. And I also find that, I'm a member of a couple groups and we have these awards. And so I'm looking, the first thing you look at, of course, is a cover, despite, right? And so then you click on it and you find that even though there is a child of color on the novel, on the cover, the author is not a person of color.
Right.
Right. So it's almost now like they're trying to fill some sort of quota they have in their head, as opposed to just finding good representations of culture and of peoples to write their own stories.
Wow.
So it's, I think in the early 2000s, when there was that big DEI push and there was all these pushes to have representation, it worked fairly well. And now it seems to have turned into some sort of quota system in their head, just to sort of tick off the box.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been an expansion, like Jason Reynolds came out. And so there has been a few, there's been quite a number who continue to publish, but I don't know now whether there's an influx of new people as, things change.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about Hispanic writers. I think it's the same thing.
I think it happens with, it's Hispanic writers, it's indigenous writers, it's Asian, Island, Pacific writers. I think the same thing has happened. I think with African Americans, we're always at the forefront, and then everybody else kind of comes along. But when our growth stops, and everybody is like stops as well, right? There isn't. It's like an all or nothing proposition.
So you were born and raised in Denver.
I was. Well, I was not born in Denver. I was born in Illinois. I was born in Monmouth, Illinois, which is a small western town right near the hump of Illinois. It's the same town that my mother and father grew up and were born in.
Okay. So I also read that your father was a senator?
He was. He was the second African-American state senator for Colorado. He was in the Senate for almost 20 years.
Right.
When he first got in, he was one of 10 Democrats in Colorado. Colorado has made this huge shift from red to purple to blue. But when he 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 was first appointed. He was appointed for an open seat of the first African American senator who became lieutenant governor in the
Okay.
election. So they appointed him to fill out the remainder of Lieutenant Brown's tenure term, and
Mhm.
then he just would run and do that and run for the next 20 years while teaching. So Colorado, I think Wyoming is the same. They have the part what they call a part-time legislator, so they're only in session from January to May. So during the other times, he was a teacher, and then he transitioned to work for the Denver Public Schools when teaching became a little too hard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I was the daughter of the senator, and so I stayed pretty straight and narrow because he was the only African American senator, and because my last name was Groff, Groff. I couldn't really hide if maybe it was Brown or Jackson or Johnson. No one would know, but you would look up in the white pages, the Groffs, and there were 12 of us in the state. And three of them were relatives. They were either my mom and dad, my uncle, or Peter and I's, my brother and I's separate line. And then there were 9 more Groffs. So I couldn't really hide. So I was a good kid. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't do anything. I got good grades just because I didn't want it to be any harder for dad.
Okay. Did you save all that for later?
No, I still don't drink. I still have never smoked. Once you get past a certain age, and if you spend too many times as the only sober person around drunk 20-year-olds, it's not really a good look.
Right.
They're not charming like on TV. They're not humorous. They're just a whole mess.
That
And so
is
it just
funny.
never appealed to me. And I don't like the taste. I never liked the taste.
That's
And
interesting.
that burn that you get, that warmth, it's like medicine to me. So I just never bothered.
Yeah, well, they put plenty of alcohol in medicine, especially in NyQuil. Oh my gosh.
Oh my, yeah. And
Yeah, yeah,
ugh. That's what it all tastes. It all tastes like NyQuil to me.
yeah. Okay.
And the people say, you
There you
just have
have
to
it.
acquire it. I'm like, why would I acquire it? Why? Why would I go? Like, why?
No, you're right. At a certain age, just forget it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, it's too late. It's too late now.
right. It's too.
I missed my chance in college when I should have really just gone crazy. But I went to a fairly academically strenuous college, and it was a shock to my system because I had kind of coasted in high school, and I had to teach myself how to study.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was just so much more work, and it was just harder. And so that first year was rough. So I didn't really do too much because I had scholarships I had to maintain.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah.
So
So, in your career, what do you think is, especially being African American, how do you reach other, young people? How do you inspire young people to want to learn, want to read, write, want to have critical thinking skills, and not necessarily, not doesn't mean they have to go to college,
right.
but be lifelong learners.
Such a good question. Because, really you're trying to just find the people who are readers. It's hard to inspire non-readers to read.
Hmm.
I think J.K. Rowling really helped with that because she was like on the very forefront of well, you to be hip, or well, not hip or whatever, cool, or to be part of the in group, you have to have read. Oh, you haven't read Harry Potter. Oh, you haven't read the Hunger Games, or those big, um, really national, international, successful books. But even those books don't represent the smaller groups. So you really try and just tap into the kids who don't always feel seen. And then once you can tap into that, then you just hope that that will spark an interest in different things. Like, I think reading is really a way It can be like a window into a different world. It can be a door into a different world. And so once you start them reading, you just have to hope that they will keep reading, right? And encourage them to read things that are not only representative of them, but are totally outside their normal everyday life. Because if you can't travel, then reading is a way to travel, right? Without leaving your house.
That is so true. That is so
Yeah.
true. Do you often go into the schools in Denver to work with the African American young people who are trying to find their place, in life, and
I
and
have worked with a few book clubs and a few like writing programs. Honestly, because there's so much cuts and there's always a budget thing. They really don't have as I think as many programs as they should for to generate the next generation of writers and readers. It's all about testing, right? It's all about meeting the numbers. And so there's just not enough money or incentive for teachers to spend time outside of the classroom doing those sorts of things, right? Sometimes they'll do it, for 45 minutes at lunch, but it's hard to encourage, outside clubs for that. And there used to be like one teen conference in Colorado that I would attend and go to. And I don't know if they got funding again. I have not heard that they've had it, especially after COVID. There's just, that if we could just find a first lady or somebody to encourage that sort of extracurricular learning, that would be fantastic. There's just not that many programs. There's just really limited. There's a couple programs at libraries, but Colorado has a lot of young adult authors. And so they really have a lot to choose from. And
that's good
the
though.
African American population in Denver, particularly, has gone down from when I was a kid. It was around 12, 13, maybe 14%. And now it's more like 7 or 8%.
Really?
Yeah, Denver has gotten just so expensive that you can get more bang from your buck, in the surrounding areas. And so where in Colorado and Denver, there used to be like black neighborhoods. There was like 2 black neighborhoods. They have been gentrified and now so expensive to move into that, they've moved to these big, beautiful homes in Aurora and Parker and, Green Valley Ranch. They're sort of outside, they're sort of gone.
Right.
The black population is really dispersed here. We don't have like a center neighborhood like we did growing up.
Oh yeah, like 5 Points.
Yeah, right. And 5 Points is not at all black anymore.
It's not?
No, I mean, it's still a black historic neighborhood, but no, they've either bought up those old beautiful homes,
Oh yeah. And they're
or
beautiful.
they've razzed them and put up townhomes and apartment buildings.
That's so interesting. I haven't been to 5 Points in a long time, but I was born in Denver,
Where are you?
based in Fort Collins. Yeah. So
Oh wow.
that's like my stomping ground, that whole.
Yeah. So you just moved further north, huh?
Yep. Yep. But yeah, so I was just thinking of a story my mom told me that when my dad decided to go to college, he was the one and only out of 5 kids to go to college.
Oh wow.
And he grew up in Pueblo, Colorado. His dad worked in the steel mill. They were really poor, but his dad really wanted him to go to college. And so he started out in Pueblo, I think at the Emily Griffith Opportunity School.
Oh wow.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And then, yeah, that was a long time ago. And then,
Yeah.
and then they had my oldest sister, Deborah, and they moved to Denver. And the first place they lived was in the Five Points area. They could not find a place to live. And the woman who rented to them, she became friends with them. And she was actually Jewish.
Oh,
And
wow.
I know. And she said to them, well, she grew to really love them. And they became good friends. And she said to them, I would have never rented to you if I had known you were Mexican. So, but my parents were in their 90s, so you can imagine what it was like.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That when my dad got kicked out of high school, actually, or asked to leave, he likes to say. He was asked to leave high school because he was kind of a troublemaker. And then he went to the Air Force. And then when he got out of the Air Force, he went to college. He went to Western Illinois University, got a degree in education, right? And so he went in and he said that the counselor was like, oh, here, and he handed him a thick stack of a book. Here are the school districts that are hiring. And then he goes, oh, wait, sorry. And he puts that aside and he gets out a little stack, a little notebook, and he says, I'm sorry, here are the school districts that will hire Black teachers. And one of them was DPS. So,
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. He had been it was between here and San Diego, and he had been at the Air Force here in Lowry in Denver, and he had liked Denver. So even though he had sent my mother out to get a house in San Diego, he was like, you know what, never mind. We're going to move to Denver. And she was like, really? Really? Yeah. San Diego? Okay. So that's how we ended up in Denver. But yeah, it's.
Well, I just like to think about that and just remind people that, you know, we're as a country still learning and changing and growing. And discrimination didn't happen that long ago. And so when I hear a lot of things like, you know, we should be doing this, I mean, I feel, just because I grew up in a big Hispanic family, that we've come a long way. And we have a long ways to go. But it is not, you know.
Right. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. Yes, we have come a long way. And yes, we still have a long way to go. Some things are just systemic. And, you know, the people who grew up thinking that people of color were lesser, they're still around. And a lot of them are still in power. And they still have a lot of the money. Right? The silent generation, the baby boomers, they're still around. Yeah. I find that my daughter, I have 4 kids. My youngest is 22, and her generation, they are so much more open and accepting. It doesn't matter who you are, right? And it's always interesting to me that they'll say, "Oh, well, they're all fine with the pronouns," and my generation is like, "Okay, I will call you they," but grammatically, it just really irritates me, right? We still have we're willing to change, but there's resistance. And then you get even older and they are it's like a personal insult to be accepting of people. It's so, yeah, it's still around. It's still around. We still have a way to go.
Well, I think that they pronoun is funny only because I did an interview with a they, and I actually was terrified that I was going to say something wrong. So
right.
I was like,
I feel like our generation, we want to learn, but it's just almost it's a strange.
It was terrifying.
Yeah,
I was like, oh my God.
You're like, you don't want to insult them. You know, you just want to do it right, but it's so counter how we were raised.
Well, yeah. I mean, anyway, it was just quite funny, and it actually turned out just perfect.
Oh, good.
But it really made me laugh so hard because I was so unfamiliar with they, them, that when I was listening to someone talk about her son and she was talking about they moved blah, 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 and they did this and they did that. My next question was going to be, what are they doing? I mean, I was, in my brain, it was going that way.
Your brain and it's 50 years of thinking that way that has to change. It's hard. It's a hard thing. It's easy to change behavior. It's really hard to change attitudes, right? You can make people do stuff, but they can be thinking, all sorts of things while they're being made to do things.
Well, I don't think one is exclusive of the other. If your behavior change, I think your attitude change. I think they follow
eventually. Yeah, follows.
So anyway, but so what is next? What are you writing right now?
So I've had this fifth manuscript with my agent for about a year. She's been shopping it for a year, and we were getting they would want the whole thing, but then we were getting turned down, and she didn't want to burn through every place. So I had an old editor from from my second and third book. I had her take a look at it, and she made some really good points. So I'm rewriting it, and I'm changing it from third person to first person. And when I did that, the voice suddenly got older than 12, and now it feels 14, 15. So I got to change that. So I'm in the process of rewriting, and generally I don't have to do a big, huge edit and rewrite because I edit as I go. And I always try and make sure that, I have all the right things as I edit, the character arc and all that's in my head. But now that I've had to rewrite, motivation has been an issue for me because it feels more like work. On the good days when you're writing, it's almost as if somebody in your head is telling you the story and you're just transcribing it. Those are the really good days. And editing for me is just like a continual bad day of writing. It's just a struggle. And changing things from first person to third person, so I have weeks and weeks of rewriting. I've only rewritten the first chapter from third to first, and I'm going to have to rewrite everything. And so it feels like a challenge. This is one of the biggest writing challenges I've ever had.
So does this happen quite often to writers when they send their work off to be published, and then it comes back from their editor and they say, well, we like this, we don't like that, we want you to rewrite this part, we want to change this. And then, I don't know, in some ways, I guess just me, but maybe it's not just me, because maybe that's why it's such a struggle for you to go back and rewrite, is because the first time you write it, you really put your heart into it, and that's what you wanted, right? It's it's a piece of art.
Right.
It takes your piece of art and they go, well, we don't like that color there. We want that color over there. We want you to change this to that.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah.
It's almost like someone telling you that your child is wrong and you need to, really, it should be really perfect if you would just change your hair and add some freckles and then make her taller, right? You're really, for me, it's like this almost this anger. And so I have to know that it's going to make me crazy and I will hate everything they say. And I have to go away and leave it for about 2 days and get over myself. You have to just get over yourself, right?
Okay.
They're looking at it so much more objectively. You're in the weeds. By the time you give it to somebody, you're totally in the weeds, right? You feel like you're just arranging chairs on the Titanic, right? You just have looked over it and looked over it and looked over it. And so you can't see it clearly anymore. And so you send it out and they say stuff, and then you're all, at least me as a writer, I'm all irritated. And then 2 or 3 days later, I'm like, fine. And then I look at it again, and I'm like, well, they're probably right about this, so I'll just do this. And then you once you get over yourself, you're like, yeah, this is going to make it so much better. But it's really hard to do because it's almost like putting, like you sewed this beautiful dress together, but you're like, oh, the sleeves are different, right? You have to like change, you have to pull everything apart and redo something. And for me, that's by far the hardest part of writing.
Oh yeah, they just took the scissors to your dress.
Yeah,
I love that.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so funny. Well, it's been so great talking to you, Traci. I'm so happy we connected.
Oh, so am I. I'm so glad that I didn't mess up your schedule too much.
No. And so tell our audience where they can find you, where they can learn about you and your books.
They can, I have a website, traciljones.com. You click on any of those links and it will probably take you straight to Amazon, but you can also find it at barnesandnoble.com. All 4 of my books are available definitely from Amazon. The first and the 4th are easiest to get from Barnes and Noble. Okay,
perfect. So, and then, do you have a Facebook or an Instagram or any social media?
I do. I'm really awful at social media, but I have an Instagram and I have a Facebook. I have a Facebook author page.
Okay.
I keep fairly up to date with things.
You got to put your kids
Instagram. You need to get my daughter. My Instagram is mostly pictures of my daughter, my youngest.
That is too funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But my author Facebook page I'll mention like cool book fairs, or I'll mention where I'm speaking at next. So I keep that up to date.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. And
it was my pleasure.
Absolutely. And I hope to see you in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Yes, I was actually just there. It's so beautiful there.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a young writers summer camp, and I did a lesson for them June 26th, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a great program. So any young writers, if you're near Jackson, Wyoming, absolutely go, sign up for it. We had 18 kids, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, good work. Thanks for the good work.
And I'm hoping to be, I think they're going to invite me for the thing they have in September. So I should be back, hopefully.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I am. Yeah. So then you can see me then. All right. Take care, Traci.
Thank you. You take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why? Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with support from Wyoming Community Foundation and generous supporters like you. To learn more, go to thinkwhy.org, subscribe, and never miss a show.